And look who's here. It's Pete Prisco here on CBS Sports HQ. A special day because today is when he unveils his annual ranking of the top 100 players in the NFL. Pete, how did this year compare to years past?
Well, I think the top 10 in terms of who the players are is actually pretty easy. But there's a large group of guys from 11 to 40 that you could play with and move around, and which I did, by the way, in a lot of scenarios. It's tough. I think the 10 is pretty easy with maybe one or two different guys you can move in and out. But after that, it gets tough. There's a large middle class of stars. And not the middle class of the league, the middle class of the stars.
How do you weigh it position-wise with quarterback becoming so much more important in the NFL?
Well, if we did that, we'd have 1 through 15 would be all quarterbacks. And so I don't do that. And I think there's a real impact in terms of the quarterback position on what's happening in the NFL nowadays with the game, the way it's played, throwing the ball. And so you're going to lean more toward the quarterbacks. And I love quarterbacks. I'm a quarterback guy. I've always been that way. But for the first time in a long time, I don't have a quarterback at the top of the list.
That would be Aaron Donald at the top, the number one player in Pete's top 100. And then 3 quarterbacks, Aaron Rodgers, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen. Now, Patrick Mahomes was the number one player last year, not just the number one quarterback, but the number one player overall. He drops to number 3. We're going to go through pretty much his entire, not every player, but we're going to show you and break down his top 100 all throughout this hour on CBS Sports HQ. Pete, you had a quote in your article, which is up on CBSSports.com right now. Dive in and eat it up. You're writing to the readers and the viewers. Nobody will be happy, that much I know, but for all those out there ready to kill me for the list, I offer you this. Try it. It's not easy to do, especially in a league where there are so many good players. It's not just fans who get upset with it. Over the years, you've had players come on CBS Sports HQ upset that they're not on it.
Yeah, and look, I love the feedback. It's what we do. It's what we're in the business for, is to you put your opinion out, and I think my opinion, which is educated and based on watching tape and talking to people, I think it's fair and I think it's balanced. And if you don't like it, oh well. I mean, that's okay. Bring it. And if you're a player who's not on the list or thinks you should be on the list, play better and get on the list.
Is there one ranking in particular you think is going to have, the most feedback from fans or potentially players?
No, I think there will be some feedback, the fact that it's not a quarterback at the top. I think that will push back. And I've already looked, I've gotten some feedback. How could I put Donald if they didn't win the Super Bowl? Would he be number one? The reason I put Aaron Donald in the number one spot is simple for me. There's no argument to be made who the best defensive player or defensive lineman in the league is. It's Aaron Donald. There's an argument to be made at quarterback. This isn't how you would draft, by the way. If we were drafting, Aaron Donald wouldn't be the first player picked. It would be one of the quarterbacks because of the value, like you talked about.
More important.
Probably one of the younger quarterbacks, not one of the older quarterbacks that you're building for the future. So it might be Patrick Mahomes, it might be Josh Allen. I think that's where you would lean if you were drafting, but that's not what this is about. He played his position that much better than anybody else did theirs, and that's why he's the number one player in this list.
A couple of your buddies wanted to jump in and maybe pick apart some of the list. Will Brinson and Ryan Wilson with us here. Will, can you really argue with Aaron Donald at number one? I've heard so many of our experts, you might be included, say he is the best player in the NFL and one of the best all time.
Yeah, I mean, you can, if anything, you can argue that Aaron Donald is the greatest defensive player of all time. You're not going to argue he's not the best player in the NFL. And I think, to Pete's point, if you're going independent of position, which I mean, it's Pete's criteria, but I do think there's a lot of that in there, as you guys just talked about with the quarterbacks. If you go independent of position, then Aaron Donald is the best player in the NFL. And frankly, he probably could have been number one the last 5 years. That's just how good he's been. The only flaw on Aaron Donald's career resume is that he wasn't an All-Pro as a rookie, but he was AP Defensive Rookie of the Year. Like, that's literally the only flaw in his entire resume, and now he's got the Super Bowl on top of it. I have no problem with Aaron Donald being number one overall on this list, especially given just how much he makes that Rams defense go.
So, Hassel, I made a note as Pete was defending his credentials, and I noticed these 3 words: fair and balanced. After spending about 6 months with Pete, the last 6 months, I think fair and balanced aptly describes Pete's perspective on most things. So I think that fits. In terms of the Aaron Donald side, I agree with Brinson. I think I get it. Look, if you want to rank quarterbacks, that's fine, rank quarterbacks. But Pete's trying to identify the best player, and I think it's hard to argue, as Pete noted, that the best player at his position last year, and it's not even really that close, was probably Aaron Donald. He was dominant from start to finish, and he's an integral part of what they do in that defense. It starts up front with him, and it's incredible to think. By the way, I wouldn't go so far as to say what Brinson likes to repeat on the Pick Six podcast he just said here, that maybe Aaron Donald's the best defensive player ever. That's a bridge too far for me. I'd be interested to hear what you think about that, Pete. But I think Aaron Donald is so incredibly important to his football team, to their success, and you don't say that a lot about defenders in today's pass-happy NFL.
Well, you know what Brinson is. He's what's happening now guy. You know, oh, look, he's the greatest. Matt Stafford's the greatest in the world. Aaron Donald's the best defensive player who ever played the game. Lawrence Taylor would like to say a few words, by the way. And there are some great defensive tackles like Mean Joe Green, guys like that who don't get the due they deserve because a lot of guys like Brinson don't remember watching them play. So slow your roll. Brinson, he could end up being that guy, you know, but he's not there yet.
I said maybe you old man yelling about Mean Joe Green out there.
You don't remember watching Mean Joe Green. He was dominant.
Of course I don't remember watching Mean Joe Green.
To be fair to Brinson, though, he had Matthew Stafford in the Hall of Fame before he even led the Rams to a Super Bowl last season.
He
right?
did.
So, I mean,
he did.
He's kind of
ahead of the curve. Ahead of the curve.
So Aaron Donald is number one. Last year's number one was Patrick Mahomes. He's not even number two. That would be Aaron Rodgers at number two, Pete. And again, hard to argue when he's the back-to-back MVP.
Yeah, and look, I think Rodgers played better than Mahomes did last year. It's not that, again, if we were drafting, you would take Mahomes first because he's younger. But we're not. We're talking about how they played, what we think they're going to do going forward. And I know he's got uncertainty at the wide receiver position, no Devontae Adams, but so does Mahomes. He doesn't have Tyreek Hill anymore. I just think Rodgers, the way he played last year, earned the right to have this spot as the top quarterback in this league. And right now, you can make a case for a number of those guys. That's the thing about this position. You could argue Tom Brady had the best year of all of them. You could argue that, you know, Josh Allen was even better than Mahomes last year. And so I think there's an argument there, which is why I put Aaron Donald one, but I put Rodgers as the top quarterback.
So two Aarons to lead the way. Wilson, what do you think of Aaron Rodgers being the top-ranked quarterback in Pete Prisco's list?
Again, it's hard to argue too much with the rankings here, these top two picks. I think I would have leaned towards Patrick Mahomes. And, Pete, I'll just ask you, how much did you put into the weights of the sort of Aaron Rodgers' inability to make decisions, his what he did last summer in terms of sort of pouting, it felt like, whereas Patrick Mahomes feels more like a team player. I don't know if that matters to you at all, but I think I would lean Patrick Mahomes, discounting the age just in terms of that as well.
You do know there's a giant I in Prisco, right? I don't care about it. Come on, team. What are you talking about? It's all about me. No, it didn't bother me one bit.
Brinson?
Yeah. I mean, I'm actually a little disappointed that Pete didn't, put the onions on the table and make Josh Allen the number two player on his list, because that's his guy. And if you go by approximate value over Pro Football Reference, he actually beats out both Rodgers and Mahomes, 13 seconds away from, as Pete and I talked about on the podcast, maybe 13 seconds away from setting up a Super Bowl win. And then you'd probably be putting Josh Allen number one on the list. So, as far as like the quarterbacks go, 2, 3, and 4 are pretty interchangeable for me. And I think you could, you could definitely put Tom Brady in there. If we're going to flash the quarterback graphic, I would note that 48 is insultingly low for Matthew Stafford, future Hall of Famer and Super Bowl champion.
Wow. I'm telling you, I think he's getting under-the-table money from the Stafford camp. I really do. We got to check on that. The IRS wants a word with you, Brinson. You're getting paid under the table by Matt Stafford and his camp.
Yeah, Brinson has Stafford top 50 NFL player all time, not just going into the season. We'll have more quarterback discussion in just a little bit with some of the younger quarterbacks. You might have seen a couple side by side there at, I think, 20 and 21, Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert. But let's go to a newcomer to the top 10 and a newcomer to the whole thing. Cooper Kupp, number 5. And so I went back to last year's list to see how far he jumped. And I didn't see him.
Wasn't on the list.
He was not a top 100 player.
He was coming off a season where he had 93 catches and only 3 touchdown receptions. It didn't earn him onto the list last year. He's now the best receiver in the National Football League. You cannot argue that. I mean, are there guys people might take ahead of him because of their raw ability? Maybe. Younger? Maybe. But coming off that season he had last year, it was truly special to watch. He cannot be covered. And that is a trait that makes him the best receiver in the National Football League. It's an amazing story to see a guy go from where he was to where he is right now, which is a dominant.
Has anybody in your recollection made that kind of a jump from unranked to top 5?
Well, Josh Allen went high one year from down way
I think he went
down.
unranked to 10 or something.
Yeah, that's close.
Brinson, do you think this Cup ascension has anything to do with who's throwing him the football now?
You better believe it does. That's the breakfast narrative, baby. We're talking about these guys sit there and eat their scones, they eat their muffins, they eat their bagels. They probably eat healthier stuff than that, but you get the point. Cup and Matthew Stafford grinded on tape. They spent tons of time together, going over the offense, learning the intricacies of what Sean McVay was going to call, getting on the same page and developing this chemistry and rapport that, resulted in Cooper Kupp winning the receiver triple crown last year with receptions, yards, and touchdowns. This is a historically great receiving season. And it is in part because the Rams upgraded substantially at the quarterback position, and maybe more importantly, because of the time that Matthew Stafford and Cooper Kupp spent in the offseason to help. When you get a new guy coming in and you have to figure out, you have to get on the same page as a new quarterback, a guy you've never played with before, they went the extra mile. They did the extra homework. They put in the extra hours to make sure that they could be the best that they possibly could be in that offense, and it paid massive dividends with this huge season and a championship.
The year before, Robert Woods had 90 catches and 6 touchdowns. So he actually had the better season.
Well, and I remember just from the last 2 fantasy drafts, it's kind of been Cooper Kupp or Robert Woods. They've been right side by side. Like, pick one or the other, it's not going to really make a difference. This past year, it made a huge difference, Ryan.
Yeah, I'm not buying this. Pete's talking about the remarkable story like Cooper Kupp was born without feet or hands, and he made such a comeback to do what he's able to do in the NFL. He's always been good. And Pete, by the way, I think there are very few people around the NFL, I know what you're going to say, so I'll let you say it, who wouldn't take Devontae Adams, Justin Jefferson, Tyreek Hill, Jamar Chase, and maybe even Steph Diggs over Cooper Kupp. Is Cooper Kupp great? Absolutely. But he's basically a rich man's Hunter Renfrow who did not make your list. Hooper was 5th. Hunter didn't make the top 100. So
that might be
what's
the worst comment
there?
we've ever had on a top 100 show right there. Are you kidding me, Ryan? He's a rich man's Hunter Renfrow?
Yeah, he
Oh,
is.
my God.
When did Ryan Wilson become Mr. Hot Take?
They must have got in his ear from above, top in the office up
Hey,
there.
Ryan, we need
a hot
a little
take, Ryan.
spice from Ryan
compare,
Wilson.
Cooper Kupp is Hunter Renfrow.
That's not what I said.
Okay, explain what you mean.
I know
by
what
that,
you
Ryan.
said.
Yeah, Cooper Kupp is a rich man's version of Hunter Renfrow. I joke all the time that Hunter Renfrow is Will Brinson's younger brother with worse hairline, but he's incredibly more athletic. And by the way, Hunter Renfrow just got paid. So there's a reason that the Raiders like him and that Josh McDaniels likes him and that Derek Carr, another guy that you don't seem to like very much, Pete, likes him as well. Is he Cooper Kupp? Absolutely not. Cooper Kupp is a top 10 wide receiver, maybe top 7, but the names I mentioned, Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, I would take all those guys. I don't think that's outrageous to say.
It's outrageous to say he might be a top 10 wide receiver. He just led the league in receptions, receiving yards, and receiving touchdowns. Like, he's the best wide receiver in football right now. He's not a rich man's Hunter Renfrow. He's uncoverable. He was their number 1 weapon. He was Matthew Stafford's go-to in every situation, and he still got open. Hunter Renfrow is like I'm like a poor man's version of Hunter Renfrow. How dare you say that about Cooper Kupp?
Next thing he's going to compare him to Fred Biletnikoff.
I think I think our man Ruben from the social team got in Ryan.
I agree.
Give me a good headline for social.
Because
Cooper Kupp is a rich man's Hunter Renfrow.
Because he can't possibly believe that.
He might be a top 10 wide receiver.
Good luck in your
possibly believe
mentions,
that.
Wilson, because you were going to get lit up when they clip that and tweet that out.
Oh,
Lit
my
up.
God. I feel bad for you.
Poor Ryan.
Welcome to my world,
But,
Ryan.
hey, let's move on to another LA Ram in the top 10. Pete, 3 Rams in the top 10. That's more than any other team. And it's the only cornerback in the top 20, Jalen Ramsey.
Yeah, and Jalen Ramsey has been an outstanding cover player for a long time. Played a lot of man-to-man, excelled at it, was great at it. But he wasn't as good at the other stuff. and he's developed into being good at all the stuff now. He can play outside, he can play zone, he played down in the box, he played in the slot. He did everything last year in that defense. They changed his role in a big way, and he responded. He's the best cover corner, all-around corner in the National Football League, and that's why he's in the top 10.
All right, hot take Wilson. What do you have for this one?
If Hunter Renfrow played cornerback, he would be Jalen Ramsey. Next question, Hassel. No, for real. I have no issue with this. Pete's exactly right. Jalen Ramsey is an absolute dog. Does he get burned at times? Yeah, because he plays he plays in this era of pass-happy football, but he is extremely physical. He gets in wide receivers' ears. He doesn't let them off the line of scrimmage. He does everything that you want, whatever your version of shutdown corner is in today's football, to be. He does those things. I have no issue with that. I have a few issues with some of the guys that perhaps are on the outside looking in, but those are just nitpicks. I think Jalen Ramsey feels like a layup here, a little more so than Cooper Kupp.
I would like to point out on the Ramsey thing, plus with Donald and then Kupp, that if Pete had correctly ranked Matthew Stafford and had not pushed him down the list just to spite me, which I think I have in receipt for him via text message, that you would really have a firm understanding of like what the Rams are trying to do with their not stars and scrubs, but with their the F them picks approach, right? You have these 4 superstars that eat up a ton of cap space that are the core of their team in Kupp, Stafford, Aaron Donald, and Jalen Ramsey. You see why 3 of those guys are in Pete's top 10, right? And that's really what the Rams want to do. They've locked up this core 4. They supplement it with really smart drafting in the later rounds. Les Snead's done a great job with that. And then some nice free agent additions and some draft and develop guys. And then what you have is a window of the next 2, 3, 4 years where the Rams are going to contend for Super Bowls as long as those 4 guys are on the field for full seasons.
It's interesting because they're in direct opposite of the New England Patriots, who we'll talk about not having anybody on the list, but their 2019 draft, and Brinson mentioned it, supplementing the stars. You have to be able to do that if you're going to pay the top guys. Their 2019 draft, they got a starting defensive tackle. These are all from 2 down. Darrell Henderson, backup running back. Starting defensive tackle, Greg Gaines. Starting guard, David Edwards. They got 2 safeties that both played and started last year in Rapp and I'm trying to think of the other guy, but right off the head. They got 7 starters. 7 off of that draft.
And that's the draft that the Patriots got an A+ originally, and now you get regraded at an F?
Yes. And the Rams got an A+ because of the way they drafted.
The Patriots don't have any players in the top 100. How many teams don't have any players in this?
6.
I think we'll talk more about that later, but 6 teams do not have any players. We'll talk about the team that leads the way in just a little bit. It's not the LA Rams, though they do lead the way in the top 10. Let's recap the top 10 from Pete Prisco and his ranking of the top 100 players. I've seen some comments on social media, a lot of people praising Pete Prisco and CBS Sports. People saying, hey, for Pete Prisco, this is a pretty damn good list. I don't have many complaints, although Ryan Wilson would not have Cooper Kupp anywhere near the top 10 or top 20 or top 50, apparently. Pass rushers have never been more important, but none of them cracked Pete Prisco's top 5. The highest ranked edge is T.J. Watt, who comes in at number 7, followed by Myles Garrett at number 9 in Pete Prisco's top 100 players in the NFL. Watt had an incredible season last year, tied the NFL record with 22.5 sacks. Garrett, not too shabby either. He had 16 sacks, was 3rd in the league in sacks, 3rd in pressures, and 2nd only behind Watt in quarterback hits. So let's put some players head-to-head here who are pretty close on Pete's list of the top 100 players in the NFL. Chris Hassel, Pete Prisco, Ryan Wilson, and Will Brinson with us. T.J. Watt and Myles Garrett. How do they compare?
Well, I think when you look at it, T.J. Watt obviously had the better numbers, but he's also, I think, a better player against the run. So he kind of all around, he's a better player. I think Myles Garrett is the better pure pass rusher. Put your hand on the ground, explode up the field, and beat tackles with your speed, your athletic ability, and your power. But in the end, I went with Watt because I think he had a little bit better season than Myles Garrett did.
Will?
Yeah, I mean, that's why he won Defensive Player of the Year. I think it's kind of fascinating that T.J. Watt is like the brother of J.J. Watt, multiple-time Defensive Player of the Year. And everybody's like, well, he can't be that good. Let's let him drop to 30th in the draft. Like the Steelers stole him there. I think both of these guys are somewhere in the range of 6-1, I think, to win Defensive Player of the Year in 2022. We're nitpicking when we're comparing them. Both are just elite pass rushers. I do agree that Watt had the better season overall. Garrett, I think if you were taking somebody just for their pure upside and what they might eventually become if they unlock everything in their arsenal, I think you'd probably take Garrett. But I mean, both guys well deserving of the top 10 nod here.
Yeah, no disagreement at all. I think Pete hit it exactly on the head in terms of explaining what those players do well. I don't know if T.J. Watt ever takes a play off. Sometimes Myles Garrett, he doesn't necessarily disappear, but in big games, especially late last season when everything was going sideways for that team, starting with Baker Mayfield, it seemed like the defense wasn't always showing up. I think at times that T.J. Watt carried that football team because they were certainly struggling offensively, and he did it without playing one game. He tied that sack record. So no issue with this ranking. It makes all the sense in the world. And if one was 7 and one was 8 instead of 7 and 9, I would have no issue with that either.
All right, we've mostly been discussing top 10 players in Pete Prisco's list. Let's move down a little bit into the 20s. And a good topic of conversation for quarterbacks here at 20 and 21. Justin Herbert, 20, ahead of Joe Burrow, 21. We know how highly you think of Joe Burrow. Almost won a Super Bowl last season. Why do you have him behind Justin Herbert, who hasn't been to the playoffs yet?
Well, I think highly of both these guys. I mean, I think Justin Herbert is truly a special talent. He hadn't got there yet. You always joke and give me crap about fire in the belly and the desire to win and elevating his teammates. That's what Joe Burrow does. But from a pure talent standpoint, I think Justin Herbert is more talented as a thrower of the football. I mean, he's thrown 69 touchdown passes in 2 seasons. I know Burrow got to the Super Bowl, and this guy hasn't won a playoff game, so you give him kudos for that. Ideally, I'd rank him even. And I've said this before. Me picking between these 2 young quarterbacks is like a parent picking between his 2 favorite children. I can't do it. But I had to put one above him, so I went with the more talented quarterback rather than Joe Burrow.
Ryan, what do you think?
What about if you pick him between your 2 favorite cats, Pete? How do you do that?
Yeah, it's true.
You just don't. You can't do it.
He doesn't have kids, he doesn't have dogs, but he's got cats.
I do have cats.
And
they're sick them on you.
Here's the thing. I lean towards Justin Herbert, and I say it all the time. And to Pete's credit, he was on Justin Herbert coming into the draft. He didn't have a great senior season in Oregon, and I was concerned how that would translate. Clearly, Pete and the Chiefs know more than, the Chargers know more than I do. I was actually talking to someone on that staff, and they're not even kidding when they said to me they think Justin Herbert's going to be as good, if not better, than Patrick Mahomes. That's exactly what you need in that division. I would rank him slightly above Joe Burrow as well, primarily for the athleticism. Obviously, Joe Burrow's winning football games and doing it not with necessarily less. The offensive line was certainly less. He has the playmakers on the outside. But now that the offensive line shored up, this list could look certainly different next year if Joe Burrow has time to throw in the pocket. But no issue with this at 2021. I don't want to say it because Ruben will tweet it out, but I think Tom Brady's too high, but we're not talking about that right now. I'm just looking at the graphic. But I love Justin Herbert at 20 and no issue with Joe Burrow right behind him.
You don't have to let every terrible take that pops in your head come flying out of your mouth, man. I highly recommend installing a filter at some point, Wilson. Otherwise, you're just going to be obliterated. That's true. I know. I don't want you to take my job. Look, I don't know that I've been as wrong as I was about Justin Herbert ever since I started doing this job. And I definitely haven't been as wrong as quickly as I was about Justin Herbert when I said he wasn't going to be very good coming out of the draft. He's awesome. He can make every throw. His athleticism is, it's up there with, name whoever you want, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes. He's in that same class. Of course these guys are going to be compared. Pete mentioned on the podcast, he pointed out it's like Manning and Brady. That's the comp for these 2 guys. And the ceiling that's a legitimate ceiling. Either one of these guys could win the MVP next year. And the thing about Burrow, I guess the difference is if I knew I needed my quarterback to win me one game, I'm taking Burrow. But if I'm picking somebody just for their pure upside physically and what they'll be able to do, again, if you unlock all of their potential, I think Herbert probably beats him. But man, it's really, really close. And I hate giving Pete credit, but I don't blame him for lumping them together. And I would guess that this time next year, they're probably 6 and 7 or something like that. And he will probably for the rest of his career, their careers, pin them right next to each other as long as they keep being productive and playing at the level we expect from them.
This is so weird. We have guys Will, Ryan, myself, we can say we're wrong. It's so different than when Brady Quinn is here, isn't it?
I didn't know if you would say his name or not. but
Pretty amazing.
I figured you'd get that in. Hey, Ryan, since you brought it up, we're just going to go ahead and let you explain yourself. Pete Prisco ranks Tom Brady number 6 in his top 100 list. And I think some might say that's just too low. I mean, he's the greatest player of all time. He should be top 5. Ryan, why do you think that's too high?
He got bumped by Cooper Kupp inside the top 5, so Pete can answer for that. Here's the thing. Like, Tom Brady is the all-time greatest quarterback in the history of civilization. There's no doubt about it. But now he's 45 or whatever. And here's my concern. And Pete, can speak to this. If you're just going back on his history of his career, yeah, he deserves to be top 6. If we're looking forward a little bit, my concern is that he was thinking about dabbling in buying the Dolphins. He retired for 6 weeks until Giselle got tired of him, kicked him out of the house. He's talking about owning other sporting teams. He's getting into acting. He basically, and I've talked to Brinson about this on the Pick Six podcast, feels like Will Ferrell after Old School came out, and then you see him every time you turn around. And basically, I'm just tired of seeing Tom Brady. And so that has more to do with it than certainly all the accolades and accomplishments and Super Bowls that Tom Brady has to his name, and more just frustrating with not being able to turn around and see him on a Hertz commercial or smiling about something else or selling avocado ice cream. And again, he's 45. How invested is he in terms of playing football for the next year or two based on how the last 3, 4, 5 months went?
Wilson is bitter.
He threw for 5,300 yards and 43 touchdown passes last year. What are you talking about?
It's the most passing yards in Tom Brady's career.
What are you watching, Wilson? You've been watching too many quarterbacks at East Kentucky Prep. You got to watch the NFL.
Tom Brady has 3 different
Did you hear what I just
Hall
said?
of Fame careers inside his career, and he just for the most passing yards of his entire life. He threw for 43 touchdowns, 12 picks, completed 68% of his passes, did it at the age of 44 while losing some of his receivers, and you want to throw the man out of the top 10? You lost your mind. Also, the Will Ferrell thing makes sense, but the Old School is the wrong delineation. It's much later than Old School. Quit saying that.
This is what I deal with every day, guys, on the Pick Six podcast.
I feel bad for Ryan today.
Has he done too many mock drafts?
Thank you.
I'm telling you, he's been watching too many quarterbacks from East Kentucky University, some school out there.
Well, let's talk running backs now, okay? And the top-ranked running back from Pete Prisco is Derrick Henry at number 22, just ahead of Jonathan Taylor at 24.
And people say, well, Jonathan Taylor had a better year last year. Well, Derrick Henry got hurt. He was on his way to winning the rushing title. He would have won the rushing title. He had 900 and something yards when he got hurt. And I think, people will say, oh, well, he's getting beat up. He's not the same guy. That's because he has all those carries. There is one concern, and this was concerning to me. His yards per carry came down, which is something you look for in a running back. But I think their offensive line was bad last year. At times, it was horrible. I mean, they made Chandler Jones a bunch of money in the first week of the season. Let's put it that way. So I think he was hurt by all that. Jonathan Taylor plays behind a better line. I think Derrick Henry right now is the reason. That's the reason why he's ahead of him. And it's close. You could have gone either way with that.
Brinson, you buying that?
No, I think Jonathan Taylor had a better year, and you'd be like, yeah, he got hurt. Well, that's because that's a problem. Like, he got hurt. He didn't play the whole season. You know who did? Jonathan Taylor. Jonathan Taylor almost dragged Carson Wentz to the playoffs. Durability matters, I think, and especially when you talk about a guy like Derrick Henry, who it did look like for a while there that he was just never going to get injured. That the Titans could give him as many carries as they wanted, and it would never bite them in the butt, and it eventually did. Like, he had way too much usage early in the season. It came back to haunt them, and as a result, Henry didn't get to play a full season. I would definitely put Taylor ahead of him. Love Derrick Henry, but Jonathan Taylor, the better player right now.
So now my options are coming down to who do I want to agree with so I don't have to hear all the backlash with these stupid retorts from these idiots. So I'm going to agree with Brinson. I think Brinson's exactly right. I would have actually put Jonathan Taylor slightly ahead of Derrick Henry, and Brinson actually somehow made some cogent points as to why. Prisco, I do want to ask you, however, are you really going to have Nick Chubb behind Dalvin Cook? Because that was a question.
Well, in large part, I have Nick Chubb behind Dalvin Cook because I think Dalvin Cook, A, is a better all-around running back, but B, whenever you put somebody behind that line, it doesn't matter who it is, they run the football. we've seen
That line being the
Cleveland Browns. Everybody runs the football. We saw Dearness Johnson go in late in the season and run the football behind that line. So that's why I have Dalvin Cook ahead of him. I think Dalvin Cook's a little better of a player. They're close, though. I mean, look at 41, 45, and 47 for Cook, Kamara, and Chubb. That's close.
Okay, those are the running backs in Pete Prisco's top 100. One of these years, it's going to dwindle down to 0 running backs.
Because that's the value of them.
Let's talk about a wide receiver who's making his top 100 debut, Deontay Johnson. He's above some big names, Pete. DeAndre Hopkins, Mike Evans, and A.J. Brown. Why?
Well, I think what you saw from him was, look, he didn't play with a great quarterback last year. Let's be honest about that. And he still put up monster numbers. And if you go look at what he did, he was week in and week out. Everybody knew. Remember, he didn't have a lot of help around him. There was no Juju Smith-Schuster on that roster last year, and he was hurt from a lot of the season. So I think the focus was on him. And remember, everybody always said the consistency thing with him, catching the ball, he dropped passes. But last year he did a much better job of catching the football, and I think he's only scratching the surface of what he can become as a guy who can catch passes. And look, it's probably not going to be Mitch Trubisky for long this season, but eventually when it's Kenny Pickett and Deontay Johnson, that's going to be a heck of a combination. And look, he was outstanding last season.
Brinson, you have him above guys like Hopkins, Evans, and Brown?
Well, I mean, I don't think Hopkins should be in the top 100. I think that's a more egregious situation than anything else when it comes to the receivers. But as far as Deontay Johnson goes, yeah, I don't mind that. And I think Pete was sort of, we like to bounce this list back and forth on text threads, and Pete was mentioning Deontay Johnson and how he would be higher. The quarterback situation in Pittsburgh was terrible last year. I mean, Big Ben was washed, and that's why he walked away from the game. The question is, will there be enough improvement at the quarterback position with Kenny Pickett and the teeny tiny little hands or Mitchell Trubisky to justify where Deontay Johnson is here? And in addition, do we trust that offense and hashtag blame Canada? I think there are definitely some concerns, not necessarily about the player, but you look at the numbers. I mean, he's hanging right there. I think Mike Evans probably got a little shafted here, just in terms of where he fell on this list. And again, I would push Hopkins out completely. He only played 8 games last year. He's going to be suspended for 6 games this coming season. And so I just don't think it's very likely that he ends up meeting whatever expectations you might have if we put him at 71 there. Deontay Johnson, I like the projection, but maybe a little bit higher than I would have done it.
Pete, before you got here, the talk in the newsroom, and I will say one of them was from a Bucs fan, but was that you had Evans way too low, Mike Evans.
Mike Evans is a tough evaluation in large part because he doesn't get a volume of catches, but he has the big play still in his arsenal. So I think Chris Godwin was a better player last year, which is why Chris Godwin, even coming off the ACL, was ahead of him. And at some point, Mike Evans, his speed is his big play ability to get down the field is going to start slowing down. And when that does, it becomes a greater impact. That's why I have him down lower. Look, I love Mike Evans. He's a great guy to deal with, and he's a big-time receiver. But, I mean, look, could you put him ahead of Hopkins? Maybe. But remember what the Cardinals' offense was when Hopkins was in the lineup and what it was when he wasn't in the lineup.
All right, so Deontay Johnson 70, followed by Hopkins at 71, and then you had Mike Evans at 73. All right, we're coming back with Pete Prisco's top 100 NFL players here on CBS Sports HQ. Amanda Guerra is going to jump in for the rest of the way as we look at 81 through 90. Pete, Trevon Diggs, Cowboys fans are going to say, look at all those interceptions. How is he so low?
They know.
Are we showing 91 through 100, Noah, or are we going to break here? There it is. All right. Bobby Wagner there, a new LA Ram, but it is the LA Chargers who have the most players in the top 100.
Well, going through Pete Prisco's annual top 100 players in the NFL, while the Super Bowl champs, the Rams, have 3 players in the top 10, it is the other team from Los Angeles with the most in the top 100. The Chargers with 9 players in the top 100, more than any other team. But only one of them is in the top 20. Taking a look at the Chargers who made Pete's prestigious list. That's what I'm calling it now. Your prestigious list here, Peter Prisco. Justin Herbert coming in at number 20, followed by Joey Bosa, 23. Khalil Mack, and then taking a look at the rest of them, J.C. Jackson, Sean Slater, Corey Linsley at the bottom at 86. Let's welcome back Pete Prisco here and Will Brinson going through the list. So Chargers, Pete, on top with 9 players. That is 3 more than any other team. You got the Cowboys, the Bucks, and the 49ers. They all have 6.
Yeah, and the Chargers are kind of in the role that the Rams were in a year ago. We're going to go get some veteran players and go for it. And that's what they're doing. They went out and got Khalil Mack, his big-time pass rusher. You add him to the other side of Joey Bosa. Now you have a formidable combination. Joey Bosa's best season came when he had help on the other side in a double-digit guy in Melvin Ingram. So now you get that pass rush going. They've improved against the run. They add a guy like J.C. Jackson, we talked about on the list, one of the top corners in this league. You really get better in the back end by adding a corner there. And their offensive line is going to be better, and they have a ton of talent, and they have a quarterback. Look, this is a team that is built to win. I thought they'd get to the playoffs last year. They had a chance, didn't do it at the Raiders, lost that game. But I think this year they're going to push for the division title.
I mean, all you had to do is tie, right?
Right.
Like, they just decided
Well,
not to go ahead and do that.
That's a whole other story. We're going to get on Brendan Staley. He's got to start playing the game a little more conventionally. How about that?
Yeah, there you go. Will Brinson, what do you think about the Chargers with 9 players? Pete saying, look, they're trying to follow the path of the Rams and go all in.
I just can't stop laughing at the fact that we're talking about the Chargers. But meanwhile, Ryan Wilson's at his house doing the lights out dance because he ain't got any power. Look, man, I love the Chargers have a great roster. You know, I think we did the reason, like, how is this team going to screw up their chance to win the Super Bowl or go deep in the playoffs? Maybe it was a couple weeks ago, whatever it was. And I had to give 3 reasons why the Chargers wouldn't make a deep run. And like number 1 was because they're the Chargers. Like if you took this roster and these players with Herbert at 20, I'm fine with that. You know, Rashawn Slater maybe even too low at 60 the way he's been playing. Keenan Allen still elite. Mike Williams, as Pete said on the podcast, probably could have easily been honorable mention and maybe even snuck in on the back end of that top 100. This is a great roster. Like if they were a different team, if this is a different franchise, everyone would be totally on board at the idea that they could legitimately make a deep run. But it's the Chargers, and that's the one thing that gives you pause for concern. Plus, of course, the Chiefs, the Broncos, and the Raiders. See 2 of those teams on there. The Broncos traded for Russell Wilson, create a problem for for anyone in that division. It's just going to be a tough division. But the Chargers, if they max out their upside with that roster and with these elite players and the guys that they brought in to try and make a push, certainly are a viable Super Bowl contender and have one of the best 5 rosters in football.
So they haven't been to the postseason since 2018. They have the most players in your top 100. And Will Brinson said, though, the number 1 reason they wouldn't make it to the Super Bowl is because they're the Chargers. Can they find success with this roster?
Yes, they can.
Or will they, I should say?
Yes,
of course,
they will.
Can.
They will. I'm not going to say they're going to win that division because I think that division is brutal, across the board. But I think on paper right now, they have as much talent as anybody in that division. Now, it all becomes can they put it together? And last year was kind of a learning year for Brendan Staley. He has to learn how to coach, and you can't always go for it. And I'm critical of that. And I know Brinson pushes back on me all the time as the old man. But there are ways to play the game and take into account game flow. I get it being aggressive. I get the analytics. I like it being aggressive a lot of the time. But you have to be smarter about it. And I think he's going to learn from last year and be better, and they'll be better as a team.
So talking about that division here, no surprise, the AFC West tops all divisions with 19 players in your top 100. I mean, like I said, this is no surprise, though.
This is the SEC of the NFL. That's what it is. It's the SEC of the NFL. Every week. Think about it. The Raiders were a playoff team.
Yeah.
They added Devontae Adams. They added a hell of a coach in Josh McDaniels. And on paper, they're probably the 4th team in the division.
Where's Derek Carr on your list?
He's not on the top 100.
We'll get to that in a minute.
He's not on
keep
top
going,
100.
keep going.
But yeah, so they're the 4th team in the division right now on paper. But would it shock anybody to see the Raiders win the division? No. Would it shock anybody to see any of these teams win a division? No. It's the most competitive division of football. It's the best division of football, and that's why you see in this list there's a ton of stars in this division.
Will, coming in second, AFC North with 16 players, NFC West with 15, but as I told Pete, no surprise here, AFC West with 19 players, the SEC of the NFL.
It just means more in the AFC West. And look, let's not forget that, a lot of the players that are on the list, Russell Wilson, Khalil Mack, J.C. Jackson, Devontae Adams, right? These are players who were not in the AFC West 6 months ago or 8 months ago. These are players who have been traded, who have been acquired. Like, this was the craziest offseason in NFL history in terms of transactions and all the things that went on with these players swapping teams. And so many of them it was like this dude just kept going to the AFC West. Like, all right, Russell Wilson's been traded. What now? Oh, Devontae Adams to the Raiders? Okay. And then the Chargers add up. Tyreek Hill is out, of course, so that's one guy that you lose from the list. But by and large, I mean, it was already a loaded division in the first place. And then they added 4 to 5 guys on Pete's top 100 list this offseason inside the division, and that's what's going to make it so difficult. I do agree with Pete that it wouldn't shock me if the Raiders, won the division. I would be surprised, but it wouldn't shock me. Certainly, if the Chargers won, it wouldn't be a big surprise at all. I still think the Chiefs will find a way to win and think they're good value at plus 160, but it is a wide open division. Derek Carr is probably the single greatest of all time, worst quarterback in his division, which is a weird thing to think about, but probably accurate.
Was it single greatest of all time, worst quarterback in this division?
In other words, he's saying as the worst quarterback in this division, he's the best worst quarterback of any division, which is probably pretty accurate. But they're all Chiefs chasing. And that's what the whole AFC did. If you look at the way these moves are made this offseason, everybody, including the Buffalo Bills, they go get Von Miller. The year before, they drafted Russo and Boogie Basham to go get Patrick Mahomes on the ground in key situations. You look at what the Chargers did by getting Khalil Mack and J.C. Jackson just to stop Patrick Mahomes in that passing game. Russell Wilson to kind of keep up with him. Everybody is Chiefs chasing in the AFC, and that's why this division has gotten so good and so competitive.
The first NFC West division we saw with the most players was the NFC West there with 15 there. Let's talk about the 49ers because according to you, they have 6 players in the top 100. That is more than the Rams. They're going with Trent Williams, Nick Bosa, George Kittle, Deebo Samuel, Fred Warner, Eric Armstead. Of course, contract situations around Deebo Samuel, but 49ers with more players than the Rams.
And a great coach. I mean, Kyle Shanahan's an outstanding coach. He gets everything out of his players. The whole thing is Trey Lance. If Trey Lance is the real deal, what they think he was going to be and become when they drafted him, traded up to draft him at number 3, then they're going to be a playoff team and a deep playoff team. If he struggles a little bit, then they're going to have problems and they're going to have people wanting Jimmy Garoppolo back, if you can believe that. So I think this is one of those situations where it's all in the young quarterback because this is a good roster with a great coach. And not only these stars, there's a lot of good players around them as well. This is a well-built team. John Lynch has done a great job, but it's all on that quarterback.
Will, you agree with that? It's all on Trey Lance right now?
Yeah. I mean, if you told me that if Trey Lance was what everybody who drafted in fantasy football last year, if he is what we expected him to be this coming season, then the Niners deserve where they are in terms of their Super Bowl odds. They're like the 5th or 6th team in terms of Super Bowl odds. Trey Lance's upside is through the roof. If he's not ready and he's not capable of operating that Kyle Shanahan offense and of minimizing mistakes, then the 49ers are a significant drop below the Rams in terms of, in terms of what they'll do in that division. And I do think it's interesting, like we talk about the 49ers having more players than the Rams, but the Rams, like we said earlier, have those core 4. The 49ers just have a bunch of good football players on both sides of the ball. And look, like if you put Matthew Stafford on the 49ers, they might be the favorite to win the Super Bowl because you would feel confident in what you have at the quarterback position. But we don't know. The 49ers can't know. Nobody can know until we actually get to the season if Trey Lance is going to be that guy. I like to think he will be, but you can't be confident.
If Tart held on to the pick in the championship game, they might have been the champs last year with Jimmy Garoppolo.
True.
I mean, Brinson hates hearing that because he's on the, Matt Stafford
I had a
Hall of Fame
Bengals
train.
49ers to make it to the Super Bowl bet at 85-1. I wanted him to catch the damn ball.
Let's talk about the teams with no players in your top 100. You have 6 of them. They are the Giants, the Jets, the Texans, the Jags, the Lions, and the Patriots. Last year, you had 1 player from the Patriots. It was Stephon Gilmore in the top 100, and this year, 0.
And this is a product of bad drafting. That's what this is. And look, we give Belichick
One draft in particular?
2019. It was terrible. I mean, that's one that stands out. And I thought it was actually a good draft when they drafted him. So what do I know? I'm the same as Belichick, I guess. Two football geniuses. We missed on 2019, but they missed in a big way. It was a terrible draft all the way around. They got one player. Najee Harris came out of that draft, so there's one player. But when you look at Damon Harris, when you look at this roster, there's not a lot of talent. There's just not a lot of talent across the board. Mac Judon, who they signed as a free agent, good pass rusher, but leveled off the last 7-8 games of the season. Didn't play that well. They don't have a lot of talent. If this team, with Mac Jones in his second year, and this roster gets to the postseason, it will be one of the Bill Belichick's greatest coaching jobs.
Will, do they do it with this roster?
Yeah, I mean, it's not going to be easy. Because the AFC, as we've covered with the AFC West, even if they beat each other up, they're still loaded. And by the way, that 2019 draft, there's nothing more annoying to me than the fact that they took N'Keal Harry with Deebo Samuel sitting right there. I mean, you can talk about A.J. Brown, you can talk about all the other receivers in that class, but like Deebo Samuel is the perfect Patriots player, and they took N'Keal Harry over him. Drives me nuts. Anyway, I digress. If Mac Jones makes a big leap forward, yeah, they can make a playoff run. But you start to look around the AFC, and you realize that the Ravens are going to bounce back. The Browns are a big wild card with the Deshaun Watson situation lingering. If Pittsburgh gets good quarterback play, they're going to be in the mix. The Bengals just went to the Super Bowl. So that division is going to be really difficult, right? We have 4 playoff caliber teams in the AFC West as well. In the AFC South, the Titans and the Colts are probably right there in the mix. And I wouldn't be surprised if Trevor Lawrence has a big second year. And so for the Patriots, not only do you have to try to overcome the Bills, which is going to be really difficult to do, you might have to overcome a Dolphins team that's improved dramatically this offseason. And then you have to hope that 1 or 2 of those really high caliber teams from the other division slip so you can steal a wild card if you can't win that division. So yes, they can make a run. Will it be easy? Absolutely not.
Guys, hang on just a second. I have a little treat for you here in 1 second, but let's take a look at Super Bowl odds. We're going to throw that up really quickly. Bills right there at the very top. Talk about the Patriots having to deal with them. Not easy. There are your 49ers, Will Brinson, 15-1 odds behind the Bucks, the Chiefs, the Packers, and the Rams. I am happy to say we've been able to reach the one and only Ryan Wilson. You cannot see him because that is his view. His view RN, he's cool. He can shorten that up. That's his computer. He has no power, Pete.
Wow. He's just, you know what? I really think he's hiding after making so many bad statements.
Didn't you say it was like the worst take you've heard in a while?
It was the worst take we've ever had on any program on HQ since I've been here.
And that caused Ryan to go dark.
He's hiding. Ryan's hiding.
Will?
I don't know. I agree. I think that Ryan also threatened to take Tom Brady out of the top 10. So yeah, I think absolutely Ryan. So what happened is
he just turned off the lights, but he still yeah. Go ahead.
Somebody at the power company watches CBS Sports HQ, and they said enough is enough, Mr. Wilson, and slammed the breaker. And Wilson ain't gonna have power for the next 6 weeks until he cleans up his act and he gets his takes together.
Either that or
even here to defend himself.
Either that or pay your bills, Ryan. I mean, one or the other, right?
You guys
you got to pay that bill. The electric man will turn your lights out.
I'm going to see, coming up, we're going to talk about Prisco's Snubs. Maybe he can just put a name on the computer and we can at least see that glowing in the dark. Who did not make Pete Prisco's top 100? You're taking a look at some of the guys right there. We're going to get the biggest snubs from Will and maybe just like a whiteboard from Ryan there in the dark. Welcome back into CBS Sports HQ, going through Pete Prisco's annual top 100 NFL players, the guys that just made the cut, 91 through 100. Is it difficult when you get to this point? Where do you move people in and out?
Let's put it this way. Every single guy that's in this 91 through 100 at one point was out.
Was out,
yeah.
Almost all of them, or all of them.
Yeah.
Okay.
Moved them in and out.
So let's take a look.
And some of them were actually higher at one point and moving down and out. Yeah, it's crazy. It's a weird process.
Here are the guys that did not make it into Pete Prisco's top 100 list. There at the very top, you get Derek Carr, Christian McCaffrey. We'll talk about the 7 running backs that went ahead of him. He did not make the list. Kirk Cousins, Honey Badger there. Your good friend. I mean, are you going to have to call him?
Yeah, I think he would admit that he probably didn't play to that level last year.
You're going to have a conversation.
Yeah, well, I did with Patrick
person
Peterson
there.
when I saw him, and I kept him out last year. So
Let's welcome back Pete Prisco here at Will Brinson. Let's start with Derek Carr, the best division in the NFL. Did not make it into your list. Why not?
he's close. I like what he did. I think numbers-wise, I don't think he earned the right to be in there last year. And he had some circumstances. Waller was hurt. The Ruggs situation, it really impacted him. And I think their play calling wasn't great at times. But he's just out. You know, Kirk Cousins, Derek Carr, those kind of guys are just outside that top group of quarterbacks.
Well, I mean, the easy question here is, do you agree with it? What did you say? How did you describe Derek Carr earlier? The best, worst quarterback, something, something, something?
The single greatest, worst quarterback in a division ever.
Put it on a t-shirt.
I would also, you know, as you mentioned, Amanda, you know who else got snubbed? I got snubs sent to me from Ryan Wilson and John Breach. John Breach said that his biggest snub is
Tyrann Mathieu.
if it did, great. Ryan Wilson said that his two biggest snubs were Derek Carr and Scary Terry McLaurin. I would agree with both of those. I mean, like, I'm hoping that the social team will clip me saying this. Derek Carr deserves more credit for his 2021 season, given all the things that happened off the field with the Raiders and his play on the field to get them to the playoffs. Derek Carr remains an underrated quarterback heading into 2022. He was snubbed unceremoniously by Pete Prisco, deserves better. And with Josh McDaniels and Devontae Adams in town, Derek Carr is going to have a monster 2022 season. All hail the Derek Carr fan base. Or
you know why he's doing
that?
So David Carr unblocks him. That's why.
Yes, and Darren Carr as well.
Yeah, you got the whole family blocked you, didn't they?
The whole family's blocked me on Twitter.
Yeah, but like half of the world has you blocked, and vice versa there. You just love to block people.
That's fine. And if Derek Carr and his family block me, oh well.
What else do you want to see from him to make it into your top 100 this season that he didn't do last season?
Get those touchdowns into the 30s, 37, 35, 36, somewhere in there, and we'll see. Look, he's got a chance because I think Josh McDaniels is an outstanding play caller. He's got a chance with Devontae Adams and a healthy Waller. I think he's got a real shot.
Okay, no Christian McCaffrey.
Aaron Jones. Sorry, Aaron Jones would be the other name.
And Aaron Jones will probably be back in the top 100 after this year. I think last year their usage was off a little bit, and we'll see how they use him this year.
Someone we have not seen a lot of over the past 2 years, 10 games in the past 2 years, Christian McCaffrey not in the list. You have 7 running backs ahead of him. Also, Michael Thomas not in there as well, so walk us through this.
I had a hard time with these guys because where do you put them? They haven't played. They haven't played a lot of football. Michael Thomas has played none. Yeah. And, Christian McCaffrey, when he's healthy and he's that guy, is one of the 3 best backs in the NFL. But we don't know where he is. He's not playing. He hasn't played much football, and that's always a concern. So I would imagine if he stays healthy this year, and that's a big if, he'll be back in this list next year. Michael Thomas needs to stay on the field and show people that, A, not only is he a good football player, but that he can mesh with his group. That was part of the problem in New Orleans for the last couple of years when Sean Payton was there. It wasn't always warm and fuzzy with Michael Thomas. There were issues inside that, that they rubbed people the wrong way. They need to mesh better with Jameis Winston. We'll see how he does.
Will, with as good as Christian McCaffrey looks when he is playing, is the lack of playing reason enough to keep him out of the top 100?
Yeah, I would have been pretty surprised and disappointed, frankly, if Pete had put CMC in there. I mean, look, he's one of the most electric playmakers in football if he's healthy. But that 2019 season where, Ron Rivera is coaching for his job, right, and eventually gets fired before the end of the season, they uncorked touches on Christian McCaffrey. He led the NFL with 403 touches. He led the NFL in yards from scrimmage. It was too big of a workload for him. And, I mean, quite frankly, the ensuing 2 seasons in 2020 and 2021 really tell the tale of a guy who was overworked in the 3rd year of his career and hasn't really recovered from it. And the injuries continue to pile up. And they rushed him back. They tried to get him on the field for 5 wins. Like, it's been a fairly poor job managing his health, I think, from the Carolina Panthers over the past few years.
He's the prototypical back, and for the current game, if he's healthy, he can catch the ball out of the backfield. The 2,000-yard guy with the rushing and catching. I mean, he can do it all, but he's got to stay on the field. Someone
else that didn't make it, Jalen Waddle, there after his rookie season. I mean, it was a great rookie season. You were talking to us up in the newsroom. He said, "Look, he's just not there yet."
No, he's going to get there, though. I think this kid, and they got to get him the ball down the field more. You look at his catch numbers, they're great, but he didn't have a lot of yards to go with him. I think he's more of a vertical threat than what they used him in the last offense. I think Mike McDaniel will get him down the field. But again, the question, you have a track team catching passes. Can Tua get the ball to those guys down the field? That's the issue for him.
Will, would you have made room for Jalen Waddle in your top 100?
Yeah, if I was doing the list, I would have, but because Pete was doing the list, he didn't want to leave Minkah Fitzpatrick off after that 2019 season, even though Minkah had a down year last year, didn't play quite as well. So I think Pete was probably a little nervous about leaving Minkah off the list, getting the blowback from the entire Steelers defense, and therefore Waddle is the guy who probably has to suffer as a result. I think I would have snuck him on in place of Minkah if it was my list.
Yards per catch has to go up for him. If he had yards per catch,
a little bit like Jarvis Landry in terms of just massive catch numbers, but you need to see
runs better, and he runs better than Jarvis Landry. I mean, look, I'll be honest with you. I think there's a lot of guys, and I talked with Will about this on the podcast. There's a lot of guys from year 1 to year 2, year 2 to year 3 that aren't on the list right now who will be on the list next year. Like, I'm going to make a prediction. Ready?
Okay.
Trevor Lawrence will be on the list next year. I think that's a prediction for next year.
Far-fetched prediction, Pete.
Well, I mean, after what he did last year, it's pretty far-fetched.
Okay. Let's talk about some cornerbacks. Look, I was talking to you upstairs, like, obviously players, they end up seeing this and different things. You said the entire Legion of Boom 1 year blocked you. Richard Sherman still will not talk to you because of some hot takes that you've had. Two cornerbacks not on the list, Marshawn Lattimore and Denzel Ward.
Yeah, and again, there's two good players. I just, the way it played out, they ended up being just out of there. They were in at some point too, both of them. At one point, they were both in at the bottom of the top 100, and then I just moved them out. They're close. They're right there.
What were we going to say about Will?
Will loves telling stories about Richard Sherman, like just giving me grief.
Friend of the podcast, Richard Sherman came on. I was like, hey, man, you talked to Pete Prisco? He's like, no, he does not like Pete.
Okay, so should Marshawn Lattimore or Denzel Ward will be blocking Pete Prisco because he left them out of his top 100?
I think Denzel Ward's probably fine with being on whatever. He's on the contract list, so he probably doesn't care if he's on the Pete's top 100 list. He got paid by the Browns. I mean, again, like, if there is some nitpicking going on here, because the reality, if you want to put these guys on there, and I think that they probably are top 100 players, but if you want to put them on there, somebody has to come off. So the question is, who comes off? And you look at some of these cornerbacks who didn't make it. I mean, Pete loves a great cornerback. Like, there's no doubt about it. It's not like he didn't want to put these guys on there. It's just that, with Surtain, you have that second year type of thing. Pete said on the pod he expects him to be on there next year. Certainly Tre'Davious White, if he plays an entire season at his normal level, you're going to see him jump back in there. I think, again, like, maybe you take DJ Moore out of there. Maybe you could take DeAndre Hopkins out of there, but all of a sudden you're reducing all these wide receivers. Bobby Wagner is just playing at a really high level given his age, but how will it carry over with the Rams? It's again, fine line here between 91 and 101, right? I mean, it's a lot closer than people give it credit for because you're technically off the list versus on the list, but you got to make the split happen somewhere.
But he just made it 150, then everybody would have griped about 160 on down, right?
Yeah, that's very true.
That's how it is. That's what this world's all about now, griping and moaning and groaning.
You do have your honorable mention list. I mean, so is there a point to doing honorable mentions? Because you got I feel like it's like another 50 to 100 players here.
Because I like to keep guys that were almost in, and some of them were in.
You don't want them to be mad at you.
Oh, I don't care if they're mad at me. You can get mad at me all you want. I don't care. I'm way beyond that, believe me.
Will Brinson, Pete Prisco's biggest snub this year.
So I said Derek Carr, but we already talked about him. So I'll mention Aaron Jones, I guess. I mean, I think Derek Carr would probably be my answer because but I already ranted on the fact that he's an underrated quarterback, and the social media team should clip this and send it out and tag all the Carr brothers so they know that I'm rooting for Derek this year and expect big things out of him in Josh McDaniel's offense. But Aaron Jones, I think, qualifies too. Like, not as big a yeyear last year, and it remains to be seen how they're going to use him and A.J. Dillon. I floated the idea to Pete. I think they're going to split Jones out a lot more than they have in the past. Use him in the passing game more. Get both backs out there on the field as much as possible to make up for the loss of Devontae Adams. And if that happens, and Jones averages like 5.1 catches and 55 yards per game when Adams isn't out there. If he's piling up those numbers, he's going to have a huge year. Might even crack the top 50. if he plays 17 games, 17 games and puts up those digits with Devontae Adams gone.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they use him. That's going to be key. But I think Dillon started eating away at his carries, and that hurt his numbers last year. By the way, we talk about Snubs, two guys that I wanted badly.
This was my next question. Like, who is still on your mind that didn't make it?
Patrick Surtain and Javon Holland, two young secondary players. I wanted, in fact, they both were in at one point, and then I said, I just need to see a little bit more. Both of them, by the way, will be way up this list next year.
So are you sleeping like a baby now? Like, this isn't hot and you in the middle of the night? You're good.
No, I'm done. I'm done with this. I love it, though, because it keeps me engaged in the entire league in the off season. Go back and watch guys, talk to people, and it's fun to do. And it antagonizes a lot of people.
And that honestly
That's
makes
good.
you the
It makes me
as
so
it does Will Brinson there. Will Brinson, Pete Prisco. By the way, you can check out the entire list on CBSSports.com. Sound up on all our social media channels on your opinion of Pete's list. Will Brinson, the host of the Pick Six podcast, latest episode ranking the best quarterback seasons in NFL history. Make sure to download and follow. Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.